Welcome, Daredevil fans. We're back to cover the latest episode of Born Again. We're up to episode 5 already, just running through this season. Once again, if you like the content, please like and subscribe. We'll be covering every single episode this season. So, this episode was the first one I'm not, crazy about. Somewhat of a filler episode, even though it was enjoyable. Also, the shortest episode we've had so far this season, less than 40 minutes, but still enjoyable overall. This was a bank heist episode. Not going to say it was on the level of something like The Dark Knight, how that began with that bank heist, but definitely enjoyable. And I think one of the key things is it showed really the abilities that Daredevil has as Matt Murdock and also as a superhero that really shined through in this episode and really made it enjoyable. So just to begin, how this occurred is we know Vanessa, she made the judgment, or Kingpin also made it, Vanessa made the judgment, not Kingpin, that one of the criminals that works with them hit somebody that they weren't supposed to or hijacked. They were required to pay back nearly 2 million in restitution. And essentially, this robbery attempt is to secure a diamond that will be enough to cover Luca's debt to Victor. So that's the whole excuse me, rationale behind this. And because of that, this happens at New York Mutual, which happens to be the employment of Kamala Khan's father. And he's conveniently just had a meeting with Matt Murdock, who's looking for financing, looking for a line of credit for his law firm. Unfortunately, they can't get it because even though he's a lawyer, they don't have any high class clients. They are essentially representing people who are underserved, who don't have a lot of money to sometimes cover their legal bills. So he does not get the loan. But as he's leaving, his heightened senses become aware of the actual robbery going on. And we know how Matt is. He goes right back into the fire to try and save all the hostages in there. And he's successful. And he's successful using all of his attributes. As a lawyer, he's actually the negotiator, as opposed to when the police show up. They have Angela Kim, I believe her name is. She's the official hostage negotiator for the police. But the real negotiator that's going on in this episode is coming from Matt. He's slowly playing on the robbers' insecurities, manipulating them to think he's harmless, letting him go to the bathroom. He dismantles one of the security guards, excuse me, one of the robbers. And that's really one of the better scenes in this episode because there's not many fight scenes, but that one in particular stands out because initially he tries to choke the gunman with his tie. His tie gets cut as the gunman takes out a knife after he's disarmed from his shotgun. Then he actually takes him out with a triangle choke. And before the gun can fall and make enough noise to alert the other gunman, he's able to choke him out with the triangle while also catching the shotgun before it hits the steps and alerts everyone else. So really nifty scene, very creative, shows off. I think one of the best benefits that we saw in the original Netflix series, that close hand-to-hand realistic combat that Daredevil strives for. We got a taste of that right here. After that, we get an even better fight scene, probably the most brutal one that we've seen so far in the series is, and it's not that long either, is after everything gets resolved, after the gunmen are locked up, the jewel is retrieved by Matt. He goes after the ringleader who actually is able to escape using a police uniform, but he is totally destroyed by Matt out in the street. They move a couple blocks away and they're conveniently away from all of the gunmen. I thought that was all of the police. And I thought that was very realistic because when you're in New York, one street you can be around a bunch of people and then you can just turn a corner and be completely by yourself. So they're in this have the sidewalk sheds, and Matt is able to use that in combat to really launch himself, and he breaks the guy's knee, completely bends it inward, incapacitates him. We don't see if he gets arrested or not, if he leaves him there like that. So that's one thing I'm speculating about because if he doesn't get caught, he's going to be limping back to, well, the most of the gang has been arrested, but probably Luca to let him know what happens. And then we're going to see what the fallout is going to be because I'm assuming Luca now is not going to have the 1.8 million to pay to Victor. And that's one of the things I didn't like about this episode it shouldn't have been so short. I feel like that type of resolution should have been seen in this episode and not presumably in episode six. Him not coming up with the diamond, not being able to pay off Victor, I'm assuming, all that should have been covered in this episode if there's any fallout from that, with Kingpin or Vanessa. So that's one downside. But overall, one of the things that makes me wonder, is this just a one-time crossover with Kamala Khan's family, or are we going to see more of Miss Marvel in the remaining episodes? Because Matt did say, I'm going to visit you again, being that Kamala's father, they're now buddy-buddy because he saved them from the gunmen. Now they're going to be having or made the dinner date for some point in the future. So is Kamala going to show up on the show? It would be kind of interesting because the vibe of that show is very different from Daredevil. So I'd be interested to see how they pull that off. But I'm welcome to see it, especially with her powers. I think that would be a cool little crossover um, that we should be able to see before the end of the season. But at the same time, the reason why I wasn't completely crazy about this episode is because last episode we had the Punisher, we have Muse on the scene now, and all that is kind of pushed to the wayside. All that's introduced in episode four, and now we have a completely different direction in episode five, which made me feel like, okay, this is just kind of a placeholder, maybe to get Miss Marvel into the picture, but overall, it's a complete departure from what we had in episode four. No Kingpin, no nothing. This is like a totally almost standalone type of episode, which was very jarring compared to what we were experiencing and where the narrative was going in episode four. So what that does tell me is that they really need to kick jump and get right to it in episode six. It kind of has to shift right back to Muse, who's taking bodies off the street, and what Frank Castle is going to do now that these corrupt cops have adopted his image, and Matt has made him aware of that. All that needs to be really picked up immediately in episode six. And this whole idea of Matt and Miss Marvel family linking up, that seems like more of an aside that they can push to maybe 10 minutes in episode seven. I don't know if she's really going to play a big part in the actual narrative because then, by the time we get to episode seven and eight, remember, this is only a 9 episode season. Now we have to really push towards the final confrontation with Kingpin. So we don't really have a lot of time to delve too much into Miss Marvel and Daredevil potentially linking up. Not sure we're going to get any other cameos. Luke Cage is still out there, Jessica Jones, Iron Fist, are any of them going to come into the picture? I have no idea. Disney hasn't really leaked anything about that so far, but we shall see. But overall, a nice self-contained episode. One of those episodes where someone can pick it up if they haven't watched any of the season. It's one of those episodes you can jump in and be able to pick up everything that's going on for the most part. So let me know what you guys think. This is the one episode I was not crazy about. I would give it probably about maybe a B minus or so. Good action that did happen, even though there wasn't a lot. A lot of nice banter with Miss Marvel's father and Matt that was enjoyable, but too much of a departure from episode four. I was really looking for a continuation of the Punisher, Muse, Kingpin, everyone that we've been building for the last 4 episodes. I was looking for the majority of that in episode five, and this was really a departure from that, but still enjoyable. So let me know what you guys think. Thank you for watching, and we'll be back next week to cover episode six, airing normally right after the episode airs, probably about an hour or so after. You can check back here, turn your notifications on if you like the content, and you'll get it as soon as it drops. Thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Welcome, Daredevil fans. We are back to cover episode 6 of Born Again. Before we start, if you like the content, please like and subscribe. I'm covering every single episode this season. You can also go back and watch my reviews for episodes 1 through 5. So, the big thing with this episode, Daredevil is finally back in uniform, back at it, doing what he does best. So, at this point, I hope we're done with the whole reluctant hero storyline. It feels like he's overcome that grief and guilt that he's feeling from Foggy's passing. And now we're going to be full-fledged with the Man of Fear, moving towards this showdown with Kingpin in the final few episodes. The big thing was what spurred this on besides, reflecting on Foggy, finally praying in depth for really the first time this season and getting in touch with his spiritual roots. But the main thing wasn't that. What really spurred this on was Angela. You know, truth came in the mouth of a babe, and she really got to the core of him. She came in there wanting justice for Hector and also justice for the underserved that have been disappearing. You know, Muse has been running amok since we saw him in episode 4. We find out in this episode he's up to 60 confirmed murders at this point. People just disappearing off of the street and no one caring about them because it seems like Muse knows exactly who to target. People who are minorities, women, people that just NYPD is not really in a rush to go and find. He knew exactly what he's been doing, with these murals and everything, using actual human blood to make these murals unwashable. But getting back to Angela, she's going up to Matt saying, it can't just be if you're a person of the people, it can't just be comfort doing it on your terms. You have to get uncomfortable and serve the best people and serve the people the best way that fits them. And the best way that he can serve the people and save them from what's going on is to be Daredevil, not Matt Murdock. And it's funny, he reaches that realization once Angela is abducted by Muse, and it's not like a big grand vision that hits him. He simply says, F it. I'm like, I got to get this girl back, and this is the best way to do it. And he didn't miss a beat. We thought he was going to be rusty. No, he went right at Muse. One of the better fight scenes we've seen this season, probably the best one since episode 1 with Bullseye, and this one was more prolonged. Gave Muse a beating and had him in a position where he could have lynched him and ended all of this. But I love the fact that it was split with Kingpin scene, who was seen brutalizing Adam, Vanessa's side piece that he's been torturing on and off. So we got to see how brutal they both can be. They had very similar violent natures. And as you can see from my backdrop, the main theme of this season has been showing the contrast between them, the coldness that Kingpin can show in his rage, and also the rage that Daredevil Matt has, but his rage is for justice normally. So, as violent as the fight was, Matt still has his limits, and he's fighting for the protection of a child and the protection of all future people that might be preyed upon by Muse. That's his motivation for fighting so viciously. Kingpin's motivation for fighting so viciously is not because of Vanessa's honor. It's really because he feels his pride has been hurt and he feels something has been taken away from him. It's really not about Vanessa at all. When he's beating on Adam, you hear him say mine, where he screams mine. So in his mind, his possession, which is Vanessa, has been tainted. And this is his way of taking it out on Adam. So we see their different motivations, and it speaks to the core of who they are as people. So that's why, hopefully, Daredevil being a hero, he's going to succeed by the end of this season because his motivations are pure, unlike the Kingpin. Excuse me, unlike the Kingpin. I also think another motivation that people might not have picked up on is simply the fact that I think he beat Adam so cruelly because of what happened in that meeting with the NY elites. This is kind of the first time this season where he hasn't been able to put somebody in their place. He's able to do that with his mayoral staff. He's able to do that with the crime lords. Even when Luca tried to come in there, he simply just upped the bill on him. So you know what, you're going to owe me another million. Give me 2.8 by the end of the week. He can still push everybody around, but he can't do that with the NY elites because this is the political realm and you just can't strangle people at a dinner party. And I think that kind of helplessness is something that he's not used to. And part of that was taken out on Adam, unfortunately. So one of the better scenes that contrasted fighting styles and fighting motivations between them was probably one of my top scenes with this episode. The other thing that stood out to me is the secret task force that Kingpin has now. All the rogue officers, all the Punisher wannabes, he has them under his direct beck and call, and they're also not using body cams. So I think we're going to start seeing more of the BB report from Ben Urich's relative. She's going to be out there more in the street because I'm expecting them in their zeal of trying to find Muse, they're going to start brutalizing the wrong people or innocent people. And the word is going to get around on the street. And eventually that's going to start putting pressure on Kingpin to do something. I think his police commissioner that he has under his thumb right now because of the dirt that he has on him, Gallo. I think Gallo might come into the picture and leak some information to BB that she can also use to disgrace Kingpin even further and start to really put some chinks in the armor as we head towards the final episodes of season one. So that's something to keep an eye on with that task force. Also, I think this is the perfect way to bring the Punisher back into the fold. You know, we've already been, episode 6 is now done. So really we have 3 more episodes, and I think he's the perfect person to put an end to this task force. You have crooked cops um, running roughshod, using the Punisher's symbol logo. So it only makes poetic sense for him to come into the picture and take them out. And the fact that they're not using body cams, there's not going to be any trace. So easy cleanup for Frank Castle. I think that's the perfect way to give him another cameo or another, or maybe just one episode focused on him to round out season one. As far as my other favorite scenes, probably, this one might be better than the contrasting fight scenes. Kingpin coming down the stairs to confront Adam, and he's holding the axe. That looked like a horror scene. You have the fog and everything. He looks very ominous. You can't really see his face. And Vincent D'Onofrio really has that presence with him. So that was one of the perfect scenes of this episode. So really up there with the fight scenes as well. I also like the scene where his suit was cut or ripped when he was putting it on with Vanessa. At first, I interpreted that to say that maybe Kingpin is getting a little soft, he's gaining a little bit more weight, and that's showing that he's not going to be a match for Daredevil physically when they eventually fight. But now looking back on it, I think that's the wrong interpretation. I think that was just a hint to show that his mask was fading a little bit. Because remember when Luca came into his office at the beginning, he's like, "What is this Halloween? This little mask that you have on. I know that you're a criminal mastermind, but here you are playing mayor." So I think in that second half and having to deal with the elites, that mask was ripping. He is only so long that he can keep it on before he needs to get back into the streets or exert his power on the streets, which is where he feels most in his element. So I think that was just an example of the facade kind of breaking a little bit, just kind of early indicators of that. So that's one of my other scenes that I liked a lot. Um, and I think the other poignant thing, which people might not pick, well, I mentioned it earlier, but people might have overlooked the fact that there were 60 victims, and it wasn't the victim count that ended up getting this exposed. What got it exposed was embarrassing the Kingpin. That's what pushed him to move. You can't be making murals about me. That's what pushed it to the forefront, not who the victims were, because it shows how underserved and overlooked these people are, that they don't matter, that you can get up to 60 bodies of missing people and no one in the city cares because they're not NY elites. As the elite said, we control the city, we control the mayor's office. And these people, unfortunately, don't matter on a grander scale, which is what Matt is trying to reverse in his role as the Daredevil, to make sure these people get the justice they deserve. So I thought that was very poignant, the fact that Muse is able to run roughshod and would have continued to be able to do this if he didn't direct his murals at the Kingpin. Another scene I really loved is actually how they constructed Muse's lair. It really reminded me of kind of a Texas Chainsaw Massacre thing. Of course, he didn't have people's faces up there, but just the way it looked reminded me of Leatherface's lair, particularly in the first movie. So I thought that was very, very effective, showing how much danger Angela was in being in that position. As far as anything I dislike to conclude, the only thing that really stood out to me is kind of the critique I had earlier in the season when Matt beat up the crooked officers in the informant's apartment. The fact that how are they still alive? So I'm giving that same type of critique now with Adam. After that beating that Kingpin put on him, there should be no way he is still breathing. Like, he should be paralyzed. He really should be dead. The way he was hitting him, those flush shots, dropping him on his neck, he should be out of here. It's kind of the same thing Matt did with the police officers. He dropped Powell directly on his neck, and here Powell is on the witness stand a day later with a bruised eye, like nothing is wrong. He should be in traction in the hospital or damn near crippled. So that's the only thing that's been a little off. The brutality with the fights and everything is fantastic, but the recovery time for these regular human beings is a little bit hard for me to suspend my disbelief because they've been getting the hands put on them by Daredevil and Kingpin this season. So that lets us know when they eventually fight, which will probably be, if not episode 9, maybe episode 8, it is going to be absolutely brutal. And it wouldn't surprise me if one of, well, Daredevil's not going to die, but it wouldn't surprise me if one of them is put in a coma or possibly Kingpin dies if this is the end of his storyline with season 1, because it's going to be an absolute vicious, brutal, animalistic type of battle between those two, and they eventually lock horns. And we can't wait. That's the reason why we're here. So that concludes my review of episode 6. As I said before, if you're liking these reviews, make sure you like and subscribe. Of course, I'll be back next week to cover episode 7 through episode 9. And that's it. So looking forward to seeing you guys next week to discuss more Daredevil Born Again, and you enjoy the rest of your weekend.